Welcome to the fourth video in this series on StorSimple 8000 migration to Azure File Shares and Azure File Sync. My name is Terry Clancy. In the first three videos, we provided an overview of Azure Files and Azure File Sync and the migration process. We discussed planning and preparation for a migration, and we described how to deploy Azure storage and migration resources. In this video, we'll discuss how to create and run a StorSimple Data Manager migration job. We'll also discuss running jobs in parallel, viewing the state of a job, and how to interpret the log files. As discussed in the first video, the Azure Files team recently released an update to the StorSimple Data Manager, so it now supports migration of data from StorSimple to Azure File Shares and Azure File Sync. The main objective of this update is to migrate data off StorSimple appliances while minimizing downtime and impact to users. To achieve these objectives, a cloud-side migration is used to avoid recalling all the data to on-prem. This avoids unnecessary delays and network congestion, and avoids a jumbling of the StorSimple cache, which would result in a bad user experience during the migration. In the last video, we covered the deployment of an instance of the StorSimple Data Manager resource in Azure. We also discussed the creation of storage accounts and Azure File Shares. This video assumes you have performed those steps and focuses on how to create and run StorSimple Data Manager migration jobs. Each StorSimple Data Manager job can take all or part of the content from a single StorSimple volume into the root or another folder in a single Azure File Share. So you can, optionally, specify to take only certain folders from the StorSimple volume into an Azure File Share. That allows you to copy the whole volume, as shown here by Job 1, or split shares by creating multiple jobs, each taking a different set of folders from the same StorSimple volume, but migrating them into different Azure File Shares, as shown here by Job 2 and 3. Or combine shares by creating multiple jobs and taking folders potentially from several StorSimple volumes into the same Azure File Share, as shown here by Jobs 4 and 5. Or use a single job with multiple mappings, for example Job 6, to rearrange shares where the source folders are in the same StorSimple volume and the destination folders are in the same Azure File Share. So just to be clear, a single job can only have one StorSimple volume as a source and only one Azure File Share as a destination, but it can have multiple mappings between the two. Multiple jobs can be used to split data into multiple Azure File Shares or to combine data from multiple StorSimple volumes. We will explain how mappings are achieved using the mapping syntax later in this video. In each job, you can select a subset of that volume's StorSimple snapshot backups to be migrated. The selected data will be migrated from those backups, starting with the oldest backup first, proceeding in order, ending with the most recent backup selected. Between migration of each backup, an Azure File Share snapshot is taken to record the state of the share corresponding to that backup. The time and date of the corresponding source backup is recorded in the comments field of the Azure File Share snapshot. Note that the snapshots created during a migration will not be automatically removed by Azure Backup policies based on a retention schedule. Azure Backup only removes snapshots it creates, so you should plan to manually remove the snapshots after they are no longer needed. An annual reminder in your calendar is recommended. Once your job is defined, you then kick off your first job and the data starts flowing as specified. Before you attempt to create a StorSimple Data Manager migration job, ensure that you have the service data encryption key for the StorSimple device. This should already have been collected and stored as discussed in an earlier video. But if you cannot find your key, please raise a support ticket and the support team will be able to help you retrieve it. Let's now look at a demo so we can look in more detail at how you can create such a job. First, we navigate to the StorSimple Data Manager resource, which you should have already created as described in the last video. Select Job Definitions on the left-hand menu and select Plus Job Definitions. The correct storage type is the default Azure File Share. The job definition name should indicate the set of files you're moving. Giving it a similar name as your Azure file share is good practice. It can be 3 to 31 characters long and can contain lowercase letters and numbers. My Azure file share is called CUST-MGRT062521 vol1, so I will call the job that with the word job at the end. Note that the migration job itself, or the related VMs it spawns, do not incur you any costs. Typically, a job will create 10 VMs to parallelize the job to speed it up. The lifetime of the job is just during the migration, so conformity to corporate naming conventions is less important. Set the location where the job runs to the same region as your StorSimple storage account to avoid egress costs. Next, we need to define the data source. Select the source subscription to be the subscription where your StorSimple Device Manager resource exists. Select the StorSimple Device Manager that your appliance is registered with. Next, enter the service data encryption key. Without this, it is impossible to decrypt the StorSimple data. Then select the StorSimple device that holds a volume containing the data you want to migrate. Then select the source volume. Later, you'll decide if you want to migrate the whole volume or subdirectories of that volume into the target Azure file share. If you want to migrate backups, then next you can choose specific backups to move as part of the job. There are important aspects around choosing backups that need to be migrated. StorSimple Data Manager migration jobs can only move backups, not data from a live volume. Your most recent backup is the closest to the live data and will be selected by default. It should normally be in the list of backups moved in a migration. This helps keep the delta to the live share as small as possible. But at the same time, you need to make sure that none of the selected backups will be deleted by StorSimple backup policies before the migration finishes because they age out based on retention policy. So, for example, do not select daily backups if they age out after 7 days because the migration process may take longer than that and will fail if that backup has been deleted by the time the job finishes. There are multiple ways to avoid this problem. The easiest approach, if it does not violate corporate policy, is to disable the StorSimple retention schedule during the migration to stop it from deleting any backups. Or, rather than selecting daily backups, you can select the most recent weekly or monthly backup to ensure that they will be maintained long enough for the DTS job to complete. The catch-up robocopy at the end will ensure that you get all the changes since the backup was taken. Or you can manually trigger a StorSimple snapshot or backup and then wait for that backup to complete before creating a migration job and then select that as your most recent backup. This works because manually triggered backups will not be automatically deleted. Note that backups will be played back or copied into the Azure file share from oldest to newest. That ensures the correct ordering and layering of snapshots onto the Azure file share. The list of backups in a job cannot be modified once a job is created, even if the job never ran. Therefore, you must ensure that your list of backups is complete before you create a job. And finally, select the minimum number of backups that you actually need. For example, if you plan to leave your StorSimple online for 6 months after the migration to allow enough time to ensure the migration was successful, then you should consider excluding daily and weekly backups because you can just go back to StorSimple to get those. Selecting more than 50 StorSimple volume backups is not supported. Jobs with a large number of backups have a higher chance of problems and result in slower migrations. So you should try and minimize the number of backups you select for migration and keep them to less than 50. But if more than 50 are absolutely necessary, then you should use multiple jobs, ensuring that you migrate from oldest backups to newest backups. To select which backups of your StorSimple volume your migration job will migrate, select the Select Volume Backups link on the job creation form. When the backup selection blade opens, it is separated into 2 lists. In the first list, available StorSimple backups are displayed. This includes manual backups and backups from any backup policies that apply to that volume. You can expand and narrow the range of displayed backups by filtering for a specific time range. This tool can display 100 available backups to choose from. If you have more than 100, please select time windows that include less than 100 backups and move that time window around to allow you to select any desired backup. Also note that, as mentioned before, only 50 backups can be selected in any one job. A selected backup will be displayed as grayed out once it is added to the second list on the lower half of the blade. The second list displays all the backups selected for a migration. A backup selected in error can easily be removed again at this time. By default, the most recent backup is pre-selected and the list is filtered to show the StorSimple volume backups within the last 7 days. For backups further in the past, use the time range filter at the top of the blade. In this example, I'll select one backup from each month to be migrated. This gives good coverage without creating an unnecessary number of backups that would overcomplicate and slow the migration. Once finished, click Select to finalize your backup selection. Next, we need to define the target storage. First, select the subscription, keep it in the same region if you want to avoid egress charges. Then, select the storage account, which you should have already set up to contain your target Azure file share. Then select the target Azure file share from that storage account. Then select the copy behavior. You will normally want to use the default selection, which is mirror source to target, which will copy all files from source to target and remove any files on the target that are not on the source. The other option is merge content, which will copy all files from source to target and leave any files on the target that are not on the source. The final section when creating a new job definition is the directory mapping section. Directory mapping is optional for your migration job. If you leave the section empty, all the files and folders on the root of your StorSimple volume will be moved into the root of your target Azure file share. Often, storing an entire volume's content in an Azure file share isn't the best approach. It is often better to split a volume's content across multiple file shares in Azure. Often, for example, a StorSimple volume will contain multiple SMB shares, which you want to keep separate as separate Azure file shares. If you completed the namespace mapping spreadsheet as recommended in the second video in this series, you will have already decided how the volumes will map into your Azure file shares. If you do plan to split the folders on a StorSimple volume across multiple file shares, you can accomplish that by defining multiple jobs to migrate the folders from one volume. Each job will have the same StorSimple volume, but a different Azure file share as a target. You then specify precisely which folders from the StorSimple volume need to be migrated to the specified file share by using the directory mapping section of the job creation form and following specific mapping semantics. A mapping is expressed from left to right in the form \source path greater than \target path, where \ is the root level indicator and greater than is the source to target mapping operator. In addition, you can use a horizontal bar to separate two folder mapping instructions, or you can simply put the next mapping instruction on its own new line. When constructing mappings, you need to always specify folder paths relative to the root level, begin each folder path with the \ root level indicator, and don't include drive letters. When specifying multiple paths, source or target paths can't overlap. So in the example shown here, the folder \folder \1 \2 exists inside \folder \1 and so cannot be used because they overlap. Similarly for destination folders. Source folders that don't exist will be ignored. Folder structures that don't exist on the target will be created. Like Windows, folder names are case insensitive but case preserving. Follow the semantics guide link for more details on the syntax, but here are some examples of the use of the syntax. This first example moves the content of the folder source folder to the root of the target file share. Note that quotes are not needed when a path has spaces in it. The second example moves the entire volume content into a new folder path on the target file share. The third example moves the content from a specific source folder into a new path on the target's file share. The last example sorts multiple source locations into a new directory structure. In this case, I want to migrate all of my StorSimple volume into my Azure file share, so I can leave the directory mapping area blank. Once you're finished defining your job, click on Create New to create the job and return to the StorSimple Data Manager overview page. To run a job, navigate to the Job Definitions blade and select the job you want to run. This shows each of the selected backups as subordinate or sub-jobs. Note that the status of all of these sub-jobs is not started. As they run, you should monitor their status here for an overview of how the overall job is progressing. When you are ready, select Start Migration. The first subjob will then start, which will migrate the oldest backup selected. When that is complete, it will automatically take a snapshot of the Azure file share to record the state that corresponds with that backup. It will then move on to the next oldest backup and do the same. It will continue cycling through the subjobs, each corresponding to a backup, working oldest to newest until the newest backup is complete, at which time the master job will finish. If the tool encounters any issues during the migration, wherever possible it will automatically remediate the situation and continue. If it is unable to remedy the situation, it will pause a job, display information on the issue, present options as to how to deal with the issue, and wait for your selection as how to continue. Typically, these options will include skip to next backup. In this case, if the current job has failed, the target snapshot may not be available. If, on the other hand, the job shows partial success, then it will be available. Retry job, which can help with timeouts, server busy, etc., where a retry is likely to help. Or cancel, which allows you to cancel the job. Once a job is running, or after it has run, you can click on it to view the job details. The most important fields here are as follows. First, of course, is the current status, which can be never ran, waiting, failed, cancelled, cancelling, in progress, paused, succeeded, or succeeded with warnings. Not so obviously important is a job ID. This is very important when you're talking to Microsoft because it allows us to look at the job at the back end to help us understand any issues and in some cases remediate those issues. Whenever requesting help on a job, please include this number. Another important field is data processed. What is shown here depends on the following important fields, which are the steps the job goes through. In the backup step, the job checks that it can access the configured backup. In the first configure compute step, the job spins up a VM for the enumerating files step. In that enumerating files step, that VM enumerates a namespace and makes a list of all the files and directories. As this step runs, the second number in the data processed field increments until at the end of this step it will show the total amount of data that needs to be copied. In the second configure compute step, the job divides that list between the 10 VMs that will be copying that content and then spins up those VMs for the copying files step. In the copying files step, each of the 10 VMs from the previous step copies the files allocated to it in the list created in the previous step. As this step runs, the first number in the data processed field increments so that at any time you can see how much data has been copied compared to the total amount to be copied. At the end of this step, it should equal the total amount to be copied. After all the copying is finished, the cleanup compute step removes all the VMs and any other resources used. In many cases, jobs can be run in parallel to speed migrations. The limits to parallel execution are as follows. Only one job per source StorSimple volume can be run at a time. Only one job per target Azure file share can be run at a time, and at most 4 jobs per StorSimple device manager can be run at a time. In addition to the above, the next job will only be started when the previous job has completed the configure compute for execution step. If you attempt to start more master jobs, then that's supported by these parallel execution limits. Then if 4 subjobs are already running, the portal will request you to try again later. Otherwise, if less than 4 are running, the new master job will be queued for execution. So, we recommend only attempting to start 4 migration jobs in parallel. Then, run at least one of them to completion or migration cancelled state before attempting to start any new migrations. A finished migration job displays a link to the copy logs. To view them, go to the Jobs Definition page, open the master job, and for the completed subjobs, scroll to the right and click on Copy Log. Then click on Copy Logs, then click on Success to see the CSV logs of successful operations, or if there were failures, they would be in a separate folder called Failure. Empty log files are not generated. This makes it easy to quickly identify and focus on any problems. These blades allow you to download one log file at a time, but if you wish to download multiple log files at a time, then you can use the Azure Storage Explorer and navigate to the blob container which contains the log files, and that then allows you to select multiple files for download. At the end of this phase, you'll have run at least one migration job from StorSimple volumes into Azure File Shares, as shown here as step 4. That job will have migrated at least one backup. If multiple backups were selected, it will have migrated them from oldest to newest, taking Azure File Share snapshots between each one. The next video for you to watch depends on how you plan to access your Azure File Shares. If you plan to use Azure File Sync to cache files locally for faster performance and to simplify networking, as shown in the last slide as step 5, then you should view the video titled Phase 4, Access Azure File Shares with AFS. That video steps you through the deployment and setup of Azure File Sync. If you do not need local file caching and plan to access your Azure File Shares directly using SMB 3.0 across the internet, normally using a VPN tunnel, then you should view the video titled Replace an On-Premises Server with Azure File Shares. In either case, it is important to please ensure that for any one share, the migration jobs are complete before you move on to the next phase. Here are some resources you can leverage to help you plan for your StorSimple migration and to learn more about Azure File Shares. And here are some links for Azure File Sync and the StorSimple Data Manager migration tool. Should you have any other questions we could answer, please feel free to contact us at storsimp@microsoft.com. That is StorSimp@microsoft.com. We hope this video provides you with the necessary information to achieve your StorSimple migration. Thanks for listening, and we wish you all the best with your migration.